In radio, we have something when it comes to people who buy commercials. It's called a make good. What that means is that sometimes if, for instance, your power goes down, or you have another technical issue, or you have a breaking emergency and you can't play the commercials, make good is you make sure you get the commercials on at the next best available time. Sometimes we do that with guests. Thanks to our friends at CenturyLink. Our phones dropped out at 8:37 a.m. on Friday, and it took a few hours to get them back up. And so our guest for that morning at 9 o'clock was going to be Tom Muntz. And as we mentioned before, well, two things. I mean, obviously he's here because he's a concerned citizen, as he likes to point out. He's not necessarily a spokesperson for the John Birch Society. We should also, though, point out he is working for the John Birch Society in a normal job as area coordinator. And it does likely inform a lot of his views and vice versa, which are fairly patriotic, and we should note that first. But he's joining us this morning. Managed to reschedule, and it worked out well because he's in Twin Falls today.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you back. And I was just joking. I said, the first time I've ever seen Tom that he's not in a pressed shirt and tie.
My company said it was okay that we dress down a little bit when it's over 100. So
there was a hockey player by the name of Jean Beliveau who played back in the 50s and 60s, and he was like 6 feet 4 inches tall. And he was known for being just this like very gentlemanly guy. And in real life, he was always photographed in a suit with a tie. And then he became an executive, and he walked around in a suit and a tie all the time. And one time, Wayne Gretzky said he was on vacation in Florida, and he went down to the pool, and who's sitting there in his swimming trunks but Jean Beliveau? And he said, I came back and I told my wife, he said, I just saw something for the first time in my life. He said, I saw the man without a suit. And so sometimes it's surprised to see that people do actually have regular lives outside of the way, so you can wear a Hawaiian shirt today. And we should point out there's some history there too.
yeah, yep. I grew up in Hawaii, so I grew up on Oahu, body surfing and things of that nature. So it's cool. Well, I actually wore the Aloha shirt because in Boise it is so humid that I felt like I was home. And I thought, well, maybe if I start wearing my white shirts again, maybe the humidity will go away. So I'm hoping you guys, it's not my fault.
Well, and calling Kuna home, it's sort of like a Hawaiian name anyway. And we've got an Hawaii County, so he's at home now in Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to mention we're about 7 minutes after 9 o'clock, and we are at 73. And Bill Colley with you too on Magic Valley this morning on News Radio 96.1 FM, News Radio 1310 KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. Let's pick up this conversation where it left off, and that is that they're having the hearing. It starts again at 10 o'clock, I think, this morning. They resumed the hearing over Priscilla Giddings.
Mm-hmm.
And I see Darmoon has just posted something here, and I haven't had a chance to look at it on Idaho on Fire. I'll check that out a little later too as well. But you've got some very strong feelings about what's going on here.
Yeah, I do. As a matter of fact, I was just talking to Steve Millington in the office before I walked in here, and I guess what I wanted to do is to be able to backtrack enough and to give people a little bit of perspective, because I think if we can share a perspective about before what we talk about, it helps people understand better. The Republicans really want this to be about party politics, okay? But their actions and their actions really support what we call the globalist agenda. And during the elections, they always make the enemy out to be the Democrats, except for the last few years when they've offensively attacked the liberty movement and saying, you've got, Representative Hartgen that was writing letters, and you've got Vandersloot that came out, and you've got Sheriff Ozzie that came out and attacked the John Birch Society. Well, Kootenai County just passed unanimously a resolution trying to take JBS into putting him into the GOP platform because of the fact that we have probably done a better job than the GOP establishment at adhering to the original intent of our founders. So taking that into consideration, and the fact that I've been active in this area for 20 years, as I'm sure many of my friends that are listening are, we've become increasingly disgruntled, and we're really sick of the attacks against us. These are offensive attacks, and they've forced us to be able to defend ourselves. And defense is synonymous with defending liberty, right? When we have tyranny, we defend liberty. We don't attack liberty. And so, the hypocrisy that actually comes from the establishment really is completely hypocritical on that element alone, where they are actually attacking the Republicans while saying, on the other hand, that they want this big tent ideology. And so I think Millington said early on that if you put 75 Democrats in a room, you're going to have one common opinion. Well, that's because they're communal, they're communists. Of course, they understand their goals and they're going to be united in that. When you put 75 Republicans in a room, you're not going to get 75 different opinions. You're going to get two. You're going to get an establishment position, which kind of may or may not sort of, be some sort of shade of gray and some sort of basic guideline of the Constitution, and then you're going to have a strict understanding of the Constitution. So we need to question ourselves as we listen to the radio and to be able to go about our daily businesses. If you really understand the dangers that we're facing in America today and you're seeing something wrong in Idaho, and believe me, there's definitely things wrong, you need to be able to ask yourself which side you're on. I mean, because that's really what it comes down to. I don't say it out of being divisive. I don't say it out of being politically motivated. I'm talking about saving our country. I'm talking about saving our state. And if freedom is important, strict adherence to the Constitution and limiting government to few and defined powers is what's going to maintain our freedom. Not adhering to the Republican establishment during an election season that really wants to point at the Democrats and saying we need to fight socialism, when all the while in Idaho for the last 30 years that they've been under control, they've been implementing socialist programs. So we really need to cut it out. We need to be adults. We need to be able to cut out the hypocrisy, and we need to be able to start speaking with out of one side of our face rather than two sides of our face. So in reality, I have when it goes down to things related to this ethics hearing, I mean, we were talking about what ethics really means, right? We've got if I understand this right, we've got Bedke has his kryptonite, I guess, which is Lisa Cochran, right? And that probably needs to be brought out into the limelight. You've got Cheney that's domestic abuse. You've got McCrosty that's stealing campaign signs. You've got Guthrie and Perry that were in an affair. And you've got Heather Scott that was completely chastised and removed from her chairmanship, and not even bothering anybody to be able to find out if it's true. I mean, here's another example of Republican establishment hypocrisy, and it just so happens that we have a conflict of interest in the fact that the establishment is becoming growingly wary of the liberty movement rising up against them, and so they're doing whatever they can to be able to fight it. This absolutely is crazy. Why isn't Readout News on, if Readout News is where this article came from, why isn't the GOP establishment ripping into Readout News? I mean, isn't that where the story broke in the first place? Didn't all Priscilla Giddings do was to be able to repost what was already written? I mean, I didn't even pay much attention to the hearings because I've been off doing my own thing, but I can tell you that I know enough about the basics, and I've been involved in Idaho politics long enough that I can tell you exactly what's going on. This is a kangaroo court, and this is a Republican establishment charade in order to be able to maintain control of the GOP. And they realize now, in this day and age, that we are more powerful, or the Liberty folks are more powerful now than we've ever been. And in political terms, we're coming for them.
A caller earlier even referred to it, I like what you say, kangaroo court. He referred to it earlier as a witch hunt. And so the idea is, if nothing else, to try to muddy up her reputation going into the big primary next year.
Sure. I mean, here you have one of the most decorated young ladies. She's a beautiful lady, number one, and sometimes people have a problem with the way people look. I mean, I'm just pointing out the obvious. She's extremely articulate. She's bold, and she gives people goosebumps when she speaks because she speaks about things that are important to us, like liberty and freedom, and the fact that we need to be able to adhere to these few and defined powers, and we need to be able to expose corruption. But we all know that corruption loves they hate the light being shown upon it. And isn't that all this really is? And isn't it all that it's ever been? I mean, you've got election fraud, and the Democrats are doing whatever they can to be able to cover up the elections, but yet somehow we have all of these people that are guilty, or arguably guilty, of all of these ethics violations, and they're going to be able to use something as trivial as what they're doing to be able to lambast Priscilla Giddings? It just doesn't make sense to me.
But I've said earlier on the show, and I've been saying it the last couple of months since this broke, that if in the beginning she had said, "All right, I made a mistake in posting this, and I'm really sorry about it," but that didn't seem to happen. And I think that, as a supporter, she's been a friend of mine for years, but I have to stand back and I have to say, okay, I understand people make poor judgments at times. I've done that myself. I mean, I'm just as
I'm the king.
yeah, I'm just as guilty of it. But I just think it would have been a little easier, and we might not be here if that had happened. I just worry that she maybe gave them some of the ammunition they're using against her.
So if I were to ask you, and I'm not speaking in defense of Priscilla. In my particular position, my position is focusing on liberty and really a lot less on voting for candidates. Although I have my own thing, and we can talk about that usually off the air. But if she ended up making a mistake, my question to you might be, or somebody that says that is, what was the mistake she made exactly? Because I might be missing the boat.
She might. I don't know that she actually read through the entire story from Readout News to see that the identity and the picture were there of the alleged victim.
But if the fact that the fact that we're pointing this against Priscilla and not Read Out News is a little concerning to me because, you know, we need to go to the source of the issue. And if the source of the issue was exposing something, nobody even bothered from what I know, allowed Priscilla to be able to explain, you know, the position on why she did what she did and why she didn't believe it was wrong. So I guess somebody could believe that it's wrong, but I'm looking at all the bigger issue being the hypocrisy of all of these other guys that are, you know, reigning from on high and trying to scold somebody that has a far stellar resume than any of those individuals have, and then to be able to say that she did something wrong when all she did was post something else. I mean, people post things all the time that once it's posted, it's considered public from what I know, and if you share it, I guess you suffer the political ramifications for it. But still, it doesn't take away the fact that if this was really something that was ethically wrong, then I think that Readout News should be the target, not Priscilla. So that's what helps me really understand that it's more politically motivated.
Well, you know, in Readout, I think itself felt it made a mistake and pulled the story down, or at least amended the story. But it's not criminal. They didn't do anything. You know, there's some journalistic ethics, I guess, that would be in question here. But again, I think even in Readout's case, it was a mistake because I think a lot of people who work there, they're patriots first, and they weren't trained as journalists, and so I think sometimes they may make a misstep. I understand all of that too. I just think it would have been easier on her in the beginning if she said, "Yeah, you know what, that one's on me. Sorry about it," and move on.
I've tended to, you know, there's been times where I have realized I kind of went a little bit farther than I should. Typically, I will apologize for that, but there are also times where I will typically apologize when not necessarily for what I said, but maybe the timing on which I said it or something like that. I guess it's a sort of a capitulation, but it's what I'm trying to do is being a little bit reasonable. So, I mean, I guess when people are looking at the grand scheme of things, I suppose she could have gracefully walked back and said something like that. But I think in her position, she's always been somebody that's stalwart. She's always been consistent. She's always been a lover of liberty. She's put her life and her reputation out there for it, in everything that she's ever done. And for people to be able to take something that I believe is this trivial is far to the extreme. And the other part of this too is, you know, the Republican establishment loves to waste tax dollars just like the Democrats do. And you know they like to blame the Democrats, and the problem is they're taking a trivial issue like this that she could have apologized for. But if it was that easy, if it was that easy to gain acceptance by her just apologizing, then why is it such a big deal to be able to have 2 days worth of hearings, you know, and paying taxpayer dollars and frustrating the entire public that's watching this charade? This is only going to empower her campaign, and I guarantee it.
It's going to the people who are already supporting her. Their conviction for her is much deeper now. I was at lunch yesterday afternoon, and I was getting text messages from people who, you know, they were adamant that they are very much behind her. They were already, but you know, they've turned into almost like mercenary fervor with what they're talking about with backing her. And this is where I think sometimes it can boomerang on the Republicans. I think that this is a double-edged. I mean, this is a real gamble on their part.
Yeah, well, I think Lyle was right when he talked about the fact that Bedke was committing political suicide. I think that Bedke feels that he's so insulated and that he's so protected. And it's really going to be a telltale sign for a lot of us how this turns out to be able to find out how strong the GOP establishment is, because it's important for us to be able to understand our enemy. In this case, obviously, I mean our political enemy, to be able to understand exactly how much money they have and how much control they have to be able to continue to kick us in the, you know, in the hind parts like they have for decades. But you know, a lot of this is, what I really like to do in my professional position, as well as my personal position, we can talk about political issues, but there's something far more sinister that's going on that I don't think that Americans know about. And so I take the opportunity when I'm on the air to be able to discuss some of the bigger issues that are going on so that people can understand that we need to start connecting the dots, not just looking at the dots for being dots.
We've got more coming up with Tom Munz. He's the concerned citizen joining us. He also works for the John Birch Society.
Thanks, Bill, for
He's sharing some concerned citizen thoughts. 73 right now. We've got more on the way, as I say, on News Radio 96.1 FM, News Radio 1310 KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. Bill Colley on Magic Valley this morning. One of the reasons, by the way, Tom Munz is joining us this morning is because originally he was going to be here Friday, and the discussion was going to be entirely different. It was going to be about mandates and things like that, and people being forced to take vaccinations. And I think we're past the mask movement in Idaho. I think the politicians know that that's become one of those third rails they don't want to touch. Tom is a concerned citizen. He's also the area coordinator out of Idaho for the John Birch Society, meaning he also covers some territories in other states too. We're at 923. It is 73. And Bill Colley as well on Magic Valley this morning on News Radio 96.1 FM, News Radio 1310 KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. And I keep referring to this video you put up. It must have been April of 2020. And I think you were outside an Albertsons, I think in Meridian.
Mm-hmm. Caldwell.
You were outside Meridian's a little prettier. Actually, Meridian's just concrete and buildings and parking lots. Caldwell actually has some real feel of a town. People from Meridian don't like it when I say that. But to me, Meridian is nothing but shopping plazas. I haven't been to, I guess, the prettier parts. But you were standing outside and you were pointing out that the day would come when you would not be able to go places or travel unless you had, papers that proved you had the vaccination.
Mm-hmm.
And that you were therefore, and even then we know now that you're not necessarily COVID free. But here we are with hospital corporations and other people who are coming along saying you must do this or else you're not going to have employment any longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's true. I mean, the John Birch Society's talked about it a long time. They've been able to connect the dots for a long time, like I was telling you before the break. And that's why the organization is important, and that's why I absolutely love working for them. Because we don't look at issues for just the issue. So we don't look at the masks for just being a mask, and we don't look at the vaccines for just being the vaccines. Our worldview has been formulated through the amount of information that we have, and we've been tried, tested, and true for 62 years. So if people are looking for the truth, it's about time they start looking at who we are. And so you almost become prophetic, I guess, a lot like Robert Welch did with his 55 predictions back in the 70s. Where you talk about, every prediction that he made is true. So I guess if people are trying to be prophets, then maybe you ought to become a Birch member and start reading our information, and then start prophesying to people. Because people like to be, you have people that like to be able to predict things and be right, right? The problem is when you make a prediction and it's wrong, all of a sudden you've completely discredited yourself. So people are willing to be able to put their reputation on the line, and Robert Welch clearly did. I actually am doing more and more of that with what I know and the comfortability from all of the information that I receive, because I can look at things chronologically in my own mind over time, and I can see where we've been, and I can see where we're going. And the problem was, I think there was a quote a long time ago: if people don't know if a country doesn't know where it's been, it has no idea where it's going. And we have to be able to be cognizant of that. And I think the political realm has done a really good job at keeping us focusing on Priscilla Giddings, rather than looking out for, Idaho being taken down by a globalist agenda. And a globalist agenda really could mean, when I talk about a dot per se, and in the connection of the dots, one of them is like the dam breaching deal for Simpson, like we mentioned before. People are like, oh, well, that's a dam breach thing, it's about the salmon. No, it isn't. It's about control. And when you look at all the elements, you'll see Bill Gates is involved, INL is involved. You've got Simpson that's probably going to be making some handsome money, or he's going to take a position. You've got Bill Gates that's involved. He's one of the largest property owners in Idaho and in the country, which is going to actually put him in control of agriculture. It's going to put him in control of food. It's going to put him in control of energy, and it's going to put him in control of water. So I heard somebody say something about Bedke being the man of water and all that. Well, to me, that's another piece of hypocrisy, because if this man really had if he really had any desire to be able to protect Idaho, he would have adhered to, or at least considered, the John Birch Society perspective on how surface water has just been taken over by the UN. I mean, the United people will say, "Oh, the United Nations is just some insignificant organization." But if that's true, then why do they have organizations that are controlling every facet of the American government? I mean, we've got UNESCO for the sexual deviation of our children. You've got these trade partnerships that are placing the UN under supranational governing authority. You know, you've got immigration that's putting them in control. You've got the presidents that have said, well, if America's going to plummet into chaos, we're going to have UN troops. I mean, can I just be perfectly honest with you and ask you what the hell is going on? And how is it that we're sitting there focusing on the trivial issues? I mean, how dare us as American people that are in our 50s and our 60s listening to this radio station, sitting here jerking our chain or each other's chain about politics when we're losing our country and we're losing our state, and not asking the Republican establishment why it is they're not censoring Simpson. Why are you not censoring Risch? Why are you not censoring Crapo? I mean, according to our Freedom Index rating, so here I go, my blood pressure's going up. I hope yours is too, everybody. And if you are, start calling in. But why aren't they be censoring? These people are committing treason in our government, and they are selling us out to a global agenda that most people have no idea exists, because the John Birch Society is crazy people because they believe in a new world order. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the new world order. They talk about the infrastructure. They talk about 2030. They talk about the vaccine dates by 2030. Everything is 2030. Why is that? Because it's the United Nations Agenda 2030, and the infrastructure is almost complete. The problem is that people have not been paying attention enough, because it seems to be too intellectual for the average person to understand about the gravity of the situation. So rather than understanding and trying to communicate and get opportunities to speak about what the details about what this is, people would rather look at you and give you an eye roll and go, "Oh, you're a Bircher." I mean, this sounds like romper room to me. This doesn't sound like people that are interested in American liberty anymore.
Hold on to that thought for a moment. By the way, General Milley is apparently chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was willing to go into the streets and shoot people down if there'd been trouble after the election and before Inauguration Day. Just throwing that one out there too. 9:30. We're at 73. Tom Mudd's joining us this morning. He's the Idaho area coordinator for the John Birch Society and a concerned citizen, speaking as the latter today. 9:30. Bill Colley as well on News Radio 96.1 FM, News Radio 1310 KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. Mudd's with us until 10 o'clock this morning on News Radio 96.1 FM, News Radio 1310 KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. He's a concerned citizen. He's also the area coordinator out of Idaho for the John Birch Society. And it's 73. Bill Colley with you, too, on Magic Valley this morning. This is our shortest window, but we will take some comments and calls. And I just got a note from a Sue in Twin Falls. And, you know, her problem is, she said, when it comes to mandates and vaccines and the like, she said, you can get in touch with all of these people in power, you know, who make the decisions. That I don't think it's so much an issue on the local level, but at the state level, her point is that they all sit on boards with the very same people, but they also take a lot of campaign contributions from these organizations, and they're very strong lobbying organizations. So, you know, just being the average guy out there, you don't really have as much what you'd call leverage.
Right. Well, you were talking about at the break. You were talking about you know, the military and the woke military and all that. When I first became active about 10 years ago, well, I mean, more active about 10 years ago, I had a really big fear that the law enforcement was going to be used against the citizens, and even worse, that the military was actually going to be used against its citizens. And I had realized that rather than going in and becoming a patriot during the legislative session and then going home and taking a vacation until the next legislative session, I traveled the state visiting with police chiefs and sheriffs. One of my closest, two of my closest people are actually your sheriff and your police chief. Even though we don't have, you know, we may not agree totally. The fact that they're that open and willing to be able to communicate with me is really wonderful, because eventually they're going to realize that the position that I've taken with them has been good. When you have the military, people will say, well, that'll never happen here. It's support our troops, support our troops, support our troops, but people are not even realizing the fact that these guys have been co-opted by the UN already. They've admitted to being wearing UN flags.
Well, hold on to that thought for a moment.
Excuse me.
I'm going to grab a caller. Caller, you're on the air on KLIX with Tom Muntz. Go ahead.
Hi, I recently came across a quote from Voltaire that said, "Those that can make us believe absurdities will." Oh, I'm sorry. Those that make us believe absurdities will make us commit atrocities.
Wow.
Now that kind of fits that discussion about General Milley, and so that concern. Now, thank you. I want to thank you for the couple. That's your point. Is that we are seeing a change in the way that military culture has operated,
Mm-hmm.
and it's happening very, very quickly.
Well, there's been instances before. I mean, if you go back and you start looking at, what the John Birch Society has talked about, we've written articles about the UN and the military, and we were lambasted because it gave the illusion to the ignorant folks that we actually we were anti-American because we didn't support the military. In reality, what they didn't understand is we support a constitutional military. I mean, I went over to the Army one day. I was at the Boise Mall, and there was a big billboard sign, and it said, "A global force for good." So I called the Army and I said, "What the hell is this?" I said, "What is this global force for good? Are you guys is this like a UN advertisement?" I said, "You guys are one of the 4 branches of the military that defends our nation. Your job is not to defend the globe, or at least sell the American people that you're defending the globe, but you're overthrowing foreign governments and you're putting in your own version of dictatorships while selling the people the fact that the less dictatorship, or the constitutionalist, in this case Chiang Kai-shek, right, wanted an American-style government. They completely lambasted him. So America has blood on its hands, and it's got dirt on its hands for its involvement in everything relating to globalism, and this has been going on long enough. And the average American person is worried about some ethics hearing in Idaho. I mean, Idaho is already going to go to the dogs, and there's not enough people here in Idaho that are paying enough attention to local politics because they don't realize the fact that the federal government has become what it has because of our inaction. If we continue to be if we continue to enact still, even at this late a date, or we're going to be able to vote ignorantly, we're going to lose Idaho too. And then what are we going to do? We're just going to throw our hands up? So here's the thing. When you were going back to hospitals, here's another dot to connect with all the others. So we've connected the military, we've connected our government, we've connected private corporations. I mean, there's this hospital thing right now with these, that is a corporation, okay? Somebody could argue, and I guess the legislators are making the stand. It's kind of funny, they only believe in private property rights when it actually supports them, and it just happens to support their conflict of interest. These are not, I would argue, and I've argued this with an attorney on Facebook before, you do not have a private corporation if you are taking tax dollars. If you are taking tax dollars, you are not, for your existence, not receiving money for services, which is another thing. Why would you even go to the hospital? Hospitals are the only place that you can go where you have to pray to God before you go that they're not going to steal your house, because you have no idea what the services they're going to provide for you are going to cost. And yet somehow America has just gone along with allowing this to happen. If they're a private corporation and we are entering into a contract with that corporation, we have a duty to be able to understand what we're being charged for. We really do. And if they happen to be a public entity, then everything that they have should be fully available for us to be able to see publicly. And it's not. And you know what I found out? So not only so the corporations, if we're going to connect dots and connect them to the others, I had talked about the United Nations Agenda 2030 earlier. United Nations Agenda 2030 mandates the fact that corporations work with certified UN NGOs to be able to become our form of government. So when you wonder about why corporations are doing what they have, and the governments can say, well, we didn't do it, and they have the right under private business, that's Agenda 21.
Hold on to that thought. More with Tom Muntz on the way. We've got a morning update coming up from Cal Thomas in just a moment. It's 9:40, and we're at 75. Bill Colley as well on News Radio 96.1 FM, News Radio 1310 KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. the area coordinator for the John Birch Society out of Idaho, and he's also here as a concerned citizen, speaking his mind today. It's 9:45. Bill Colley as well on News Radio 96.1 FM, News Radio 1310 KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. Still holding steady at 73 at the moment. And got a quick point. We got to mention a couple of quick things about JBS. Number one, your territory. When we say area, it's bigger than Idaho, and it has been now for some time.
Yes. Yep. I have east, west, and southern Idaho, and then they gave me eastern Oregon and all the way to Bend, and then they gave me northern Nevada, which includes Carson City and Reno. So if you're listening to any of those areas and you want to meet, I'm around Twin Falls today. But if you're interested in visiting with me, I'd be interested in doing that. If you're interested in membership, you should definitely look me up. If you want more information, go to jbs.org. I'd be happy to visit with you, and I try to be around Twin Falls and meet as many people as I can. I know there are many, many listeners here in Twin Falls because it is a pretty conservative area that are on the fence about who we are.
Mm-hmm.
More people in Twin Falls are actually becoming members because they're realizing that we've been right all along. And I'm not just saying that to say it, I'm just saying it for what it is. But if we really want to be able to work together to be able to fight these problems, we have to understand ourselves, which means we have to understand our Constitution and our fundamental principles. And we have to understand the enemy from a 10,000-foot view rather than just, realize or feeling that the Democrats are the enemy, because there's a lot more going on.
Yeah, and when you mentioned how people can join, it's not terribly expensive, right?
No, it's $7.25 a month. So it's, we have quarterly memberships for a credit card, which is a really popular option. It's $22 a single for every quarter, and then $25 for a couple, and it's $87 for a single or $99 for a couple if people want to pay annually. We also have monthly memberships for people that have deeper pockets that really can identify with what we're doing. $30 a month, $50 a month. And we have advertising too. We really need advertisers and to be able to, if you want to be able to make a statement, we would encourage you to be able to get involved in some advertising and even corporate membership.
You'll get a copy of New American too.
Yes, you get 2 copies a month, and then you'll get a monthly bulletin and access to local chapters. We've got a pretty good chapter out here in Twin Falls, and we got one in Buell and others around the area.
I know that even the Washington Post a few weeks ago did a story about the resurgence of the JBS because it was kind of faded from public view for many, many years, and now is back. Really has succeeded the Tea Party movement in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, I mean, when we have people in northern Idaho that have actually passed it unanimously at a Republican Central Committee, I think that says quite a bit about JBS, and that people are realizing that, you know what, maybe we ought to just realize that the way I felt about them all these years was wrong.
We got a caller. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air with Tom Munz from JBS on KLIX.
Good morning, gentlemen. As I was listening to your show, and Tom, you're just knocking it out of the park. But it's interesting, as I was listening to your show, I had a news alert come on my phone, and it was breaking news that the New York City Mayor, de Blasio, is announcing that he's requiring employees and customers of indoor dining establishments, fitness facilities, and entertainment facilities to have at least 1 dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. This is a statewide mandate that he is making, and I just find it was convenient that here you're talking about a lot of these things, and this is happening just as we speak, and I'll let you guys talk about it. Thanks again for all you guys do.
Tom, do you think that this, and I want to thank her for the call, do you think that this is just an opportunity or an effort underway with these people to try and just continue? They've really grown fond of that control.
They have. Well, what is it? It's what do they say? I can't remember the quote, but basically it's got everything to do with control. If you give somebody a little bit of control, all they want is more. And so I think what we're looking at here is people can say, I know what people are going to think that are listening. Well, that caller was just talking about New York. New York is 3,000 miles away. That's not going to happen in Idaho. Well, we've got dam breaching by a congressman in your backyard that is happening here. You've got a globalist agenda that has managed to circumvent Congress. It's managed to circumvent your legislature. It's managed to circumvent your school board. It's managed to circumvent your city council, and it's almost finished. The infrastructure is almost finished. So for you to be able to ignorantly say, and I boldly say that, to be able to think that what I'm saying isn't true, you're just not looking hard enough. I mean, we have, I think Millington earlier was talking about cybersecurity and about how the fact that he didn't trust it. Well, then why does the GOP support the Idaho RFID? It's complete hypocrisy. Do they not see the bigger issue? So what they want to train you to do is to be able to talk about cybersecurity as if it's a standalone issue. Cybersecurity is not a standalone issue. Cybersecurity is connected with technocracy. It's about the incremental implementation of a technocratic surveillance state, which Brzezinski talked about in his books in the 30s or whatever it was. Then you've got, this idea about, well, people are in the authority for water and all of that, and you've got these Republicans making a play for the fact that they're in support of liberty, but everything that they say is hypocrisy because they're not necessarily about the issue per se, but it's completely contradictory when you start looking at what it's like when you're connecting the dots. I mean, if the Idaho GOP, like Brad Little and all these other yahoos, are going to sit there and they are going to be able to cave to the federal government, not only are they derelict in their duty, but they're hypocrites. For them to be able to allow for the federal mandates and control of corporations and all of this kind of stuff is all the degradation of liberty. I mean, you have to understand these corporations, they support communal collective rights. Okay, God created individual rights. So if they are going to be able to protect corporate collective rights rather than individual rights, then is that more subversive then to be able to support the collective nature of it, or should the legislature be supporting individual rights? And we can clearly understand what position they are, especially the conflict of interest with the funding that they're getting for elections.
I think we've got a caller looking to join us. And caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Hi. I just wanted to let Tom know. I don't know if I discussed this with him before, but to let him know how far the UN is involved in everything in the United States. They actually own all of our national monuments. They own Yellowstone. They own everything. Every forest. Everything that we have that's a national monument.
Well, thank you, Tom. Can you confirm that?
No, unless she's got information to be able to prove that. I can't say that they own it. I can say that I can say that there is a UN entity that accompanies every U.S. bureaucratic agency that actually has an oversight or control over everything that she's talking about. But I don't know about ownership.
How does that help?
I would have to submit to that to JBS or something to find out.
Well, I looked at it on the UN website years ago, and it said that it owned, or at least controlled, all of these things, and that every one of our national monuments, if you can find it, because they hide them, have brass plaques that say that the UN is involved with it.
Well, thank you for the call. I think that, of course, a lot of what we're seeing when you mention oversight is that there are all these rules that countries have agreed to. It's just like global warming, right? It's like you get countries together and then all of a sudden they say, we're going to all work with these protocols. Kind of the same thing the UN does on a number of different fronts, intergovernmental panels and the like that they have.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's and the other thing to consider too is for people that are listening to the radio, there's a certain level of moderation I've learned. I can't believe I'm saying this. You have to be able to speak to people at their level, and I don't mean that as a smart, stupid thing. I'm talking about where they are on the political spectrum and what they understand.
Right.
If the idea for us is to be able to cast a wider net, then we're going to have to speak in terms of things that seem more reasonable to them. And I know that it seems like I've exceeded that, but at this point in time, I think that we're okay. I think we're okay at least going this far. People are going to have a harder time to believe that the United Nations owns everything, and it's going to be easier for them to believe, if at all, that they actually have some sort of control. And so I think I have to be really, really careful, especially since I can't substantiate any of those claims. I can only talk about what I know for sure. And that's one thing I do know is that the United Nations does have control over the United States government. And the thing that's worse than that is the fact that China, that you have China that are major occupying forces in the United Nations, ironically relating to human rights. So you'd really have to ask yourself how communists ended up getting in support of rights, and yet they're going to be able to dictate those human rights for the entire globe.
Got about 60 seconds for a caller, and if I can get the call on the air. Caller, you got about 60 seconds. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll make it quick. Anyway, the Constitution says, when people take the oath, they say they're going to do something for foreign and domestic. Isn't the UN domestic terrorists because they're trying to take over our country as far as the Joe Bidens and the Nancy Pelosi's and whatnot going against the Supreme Court? I don't know.
Time, you got about a minute.
Well, I'd say foreign enemies are foreign enemies and domestic enemies are domestic enemies, whether they actually live here or not. If they're still foreign and they're foreign to our culture, I would advocate the fact that they're actually foreign enemies. But I guess it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things anyway. I mean, our founders said that we were going to be taken from within. I mean, I think that we have been taken from within because within has allowed without to be able to enter within.
And what's interesting is how they're trying to describe so many Middle Americans, and General Milley was one of those, as domestic enemies, people who used to just do all the working and dying in this country and pay all the bills.
Yep, exactly right. Exactly right. We're under a lot of things. I'm not sure if we're up against something.
30 seconds or so.
Okay. Well, I should probably wait until after the break. But there's a running list of things that I wanted to be able to mention before
I have to do it another day
before I left. Yeah.
Dan Bongino's on the way.
Oh, is he? Oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, if you guys are interested in joining us for, and wanting to learn more, I'd love to have coffee with you. I'd love to visit. I'm attending the Republican picnic, I think, tomorrow, and I think I'll be in Burley today at the barbecue. But if you guys want to visit, can I give my number, Bill? It's 208-861-6405. That's 208-861-6405. If you guys are understanding the gravity of the situation that we're facing in this country and you want to get involved, please give us a shot.
We'll do this again so we can get to more of this.
Anytime, Bill.
Yeah, we want to thank Tom Muntz.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad he was able to do this because after the other day, I thought he didn't want to talk to me any longer. We've got a break for news in just a moment. It's almost 10 o'clock. We're at 73. Again, Dan Bongino is on the way after news. Bill Colley saying, God willing, the creek don't rise. I'll be back here tomorrow morning between 6 and 10 a.m.